So this session is on ensuring compliance, safety and transparency in chemical supply chain. So I start with Anurag, who is on my left. Anurag, if you can talk about transparency in supply chain and how we can better it, because unless and until you know what is there in the box, you will not be able to manage things properly. So your thoughts, sir.
Yeah, hi. When we speak of transparency in terms of supply chain, the term that we generally use and nowadays is the end-to-end transparency and visibility. So how critical or how important it is for the information and the data to flow. So we have different legs within the chain, which is we have the backend part, which is the supplier part, the manufacturing part, the logistics and the distribution part. So with the latest advent of technologies, we can get visibility in terms of how and what the flow of information and goods are. You have real-time tracking, you have visibility with the latest tools in terms of IoT, in terms of RFID and all those things. Similarly, this is mostly on the distribution and we talked about on the logistics part. Similarly, in Pidilite, during exports, we have a lot of logistics control towers, etc., where we actually are able to track our maritime shipment on real-time basis, where we are in terms of the supply of the chemicals. The next leg would be obviously in terms of we spoke in the last session about collaboration, which people spoke about being the buzzword. In the leg prior to that, which is towards the supplier end, how do we ensure that in terms of the quality of the products that we are getting from the suppliers, whether it is the raw materials or the packaging materials, how do we get that information flow to them? How do we ensure the information that is flowing in terms of manufacturing, in terms of quality that is flowing from our organization to them, so that they can actually take appropriate actions and deliver us that quality and that standard. So in Pidilite specifically, we do have a lot of control checks as well as the quality standards which we maintain at supplier end, and we do have regular audits at supplier end which ensures that. And similarly, the next aspect would be in terms of transparency, how do we use data and leverage that analytics? So in terms of, we have a lot of technological tools that are coming up which provides us end-to-end interaction and visibility. So how do we use that? And in terms of building capability in terms of people, how to use those tools? Because unless people understand and get trained on how to manage those exceptions are not there, probably that information flow will not be helpful. So definitely capability building in terms of people, in terms of training them on using that data. Yeah, so all these three legs, I think that will definitely help in ensuring transparency and visibility in terms of supply chain.
You are also coming up with new products, and so how will you try to make it that they are also transparent, and with the new regulations coming into picture, how do you ensure that this happens, and the bettering part of it, what are the steps that needs to be taken for bettering the transparency?
So we obviously in terms of compliances, we ensure that we are able to track our products in terms of actually where or what part of the chain we went wrong. If we want to have those measures in terms of actually getting the visibility in terms of quality where it is, we are able to track that. So let's say the quality of a particular sealant or a particular SKU is not good. How quickly we can actually recall that from the market, and how quickly we can act upon that and identify which leg of the supply chain it failed, and then address that quickly as much as possible. And we do have actually in our compliances or SQRC procedures, stress testing as we call, wherein we are able to understand which leg of the node is going to fail most likely, and that is where we do mock recalls as well as stress testing.
Thanks, Anurag ji. Mr. Gadre, if you can talk about the risk management and
Thank you.
what supplier due diligence would you like to do so that you are complying, you are also safe, and there is also transparency in chemical supply chain.
Sure. Good afternoon, rather good evening now. When I started my career in early 90s, the due diligence word was only for the chosen few, and only the MDs and the legal department was using that word. Now, days are changing fast, and due diligence is required in every action you take. Because now, if we talk about the supplier due diligence, what earlier used to be like, if there is an acquisition, then due diligence was done, where the advocates were actually going through a lot of data, they were investigating everything, and those kind of working now have percolated down to each of your actions while you are finding a new vendor. Due diligence is actually nothing but finding the capacity of any of your business partners and whether they can form a good alliance with your company, and particularly in case of suppliers, whether they are going to be a good supplier. So if I go through my checklist for vendor registration, we do right from, of course, from financial due diligence, operational due diligence. More so, we also do the culture due diligence. So when I am forming an alliance with any of the business partners, what is important is what are they capable of. Now, here we are talking about transparency. So many of your business secrets will be shared with your suppliers, your customers, and then, of course, NDAs and everything is signed, but none of them is useful, really. If the best example is auditor, your internal auditor or statutory auditors. They come, visit your office, they see all of your data, and then give the inputs to you that this is the way you can do it better way. Now, where do they get this information from? Although each of the auditors signs NDA with every company they audit, this information is traveling throughout the world. That is important. So one very important factor is when you are finding your suppliers, how much you can trust them is very important, extremely important, because suppose you are doing a vendor managed inventory. They will know about your consumption patterns of that particular material. So there your culture. So if I give them my consumption patterns, I have to be 100% sure that those consumption patterns are not leaked anywhere else. So these kind of, the trust which is very important, that is why culture has formed a big part of due diligence while we do the vendor registrations. Associated with this, many risks are also there. So one is leakage of data. Second part is actually your suppliers not following certain regulatory requirements, and that comes onto you. Or even your customers not completing the regulatory requirements, and that is coming on to you. I'll give you a simplest example. The person who is lifting scrap from your company. Now, many of us in the packaging industry, we are selling, we know EPR has come into effect, and we have actually started going to the scrap vendors, actually a kabadi wala, Hindi mein bole do, and we are visiting their factories and see what they are doing and whether they are capable of handling that scrap effectively and in line with the regulatory requirements. So these are the additional risks which are associated with your business which are coming up. The regulatory laws are getting stringent. More so, your moral responsibility has to be very high, because not only the ISO certifications are there, but then the TPM and the responsible care and all of those certifications you do, they are not for namesake. You have to live them and you have to demonstrate them. So that is how the due diligence has gone from top management to every corner of the business.
Thank you, Ravindra ji. Prakash, Wagh ji, if you can talk about regulatory compliances and emergency preparedness.
Mainly, hello. Regarding regulatory,
You're audible.
regarding regulatory compliance, if we see, since I belongs to Clariant India, regulatory compliance is taken as a high priority in our company. So my request to everyone here that please remember that regulatory compliance is always on a top priority. Now, in case of India, if we see the regulatory compliance which is implemented in India is at a very nascent stage. If we compare our regulatory compliances with the rest of the countries like Europe or USA, so whatever has been implemented in India, let us say they have right now having Central Motor Vehicle Act, which is really a very nice act, but people don't follow Central Motor Vehicle Act in India, and there are a lot of what we can say bypasses are made to this particular law. So whenever we are sending any export consignment, we send this export consignment in, we are mandatory to be sent this consignment into UN approved packages. But when we are sending the same product in our India, in any other part of India, we don't use UN approved package. So in short, this regulatory compliance is not being taken what we can say care in India, that what we get strongly. And we should take it strongly, because anything can happen on the road. Suppose our package is not compatible, suppose our package is not good enough, then incident may happen, and then finally the company image will go wrong. So the regulatory compliance is always on the top priority one should take. I will give a classic example. In all over the world, globally harmonized SDSs are implemented. But in India, the rule there is no such rule in India. But Clariant being a multinational company, we have our systems. So this is a prime document which says that what need to be done in case of emergency, what first aid measures are there. And whenever we send any consignment, this is a prime document. Every transport information is also there in SDS. So one has to be always on a compliant side. Another example is, most of the times people misdeclare that even though the product is dangerous goods, we say it is not dangerous good and we send the consignment, which is again a non-compliances. And if this consignment goes to the regulated country, then we will be always in a trouble. So this practice one has to avoid whenever we are doing business with the ethics. Another classic example I will give regarding this regulatory part is every country is having its own inventory list. But if you see in India, we don't have such type of regulations. Because if any material goes to the Europe, then they need to have REACH. If it goes to the Australia, it should be listed in their own country inventory list. But in India, there is no inventory list. So government is making some efforts to build this inventory list. But still, again, I will say it is at a nascent stage. So one has to be very careful about this regulatory compliance part. Maybe I will also like to ask Panicker sir to add on this particular question, because he is running an institute where these regulations are really being taught, and maybe over to you, sir.
Thank you, Prakash Wagh ji. Now my question is to Radharamanan Panicker ji. and you are a safety expert, and that too for dangerous goods. So if you can throw light on how to comply with those, and with respect to chemical supply chain. Over to you, sir.
A couple of observations were made in the earlier sessions also, that we have this product, but then cost becomes a factor and people don't want to use it. And then we talk about MSDS and we talk about compliance. Now what is compliance basically? Compliance means that you have to observe a set of guidelines, a set of rules which are established by law. If it's a guideline, nobody is going to follow. Okay, so compliant comes from the very fact that it has got a legal connotation. But in our country, our problem is we got too many laws. And we have no implementation. The reason why people are taking chances with dangerous goods is because they know for sure whatever can happen. Even a big warehouse fire can happen, 100 people will be killed. Basically nothing was going to happen. Some newspaper will, or TV, now today not newspaper, TV will publish it, and then thereafter there will be some settlement and everything is done and we are all back to business. Look at what US is doing. The Department of Transport has got 5,000 plus inspectors moving around in the ports and the airports, checking for non-compliant behavior from shippers and forwarders and the shipping line and the airline. Once they catch someone, they give an opportunity to be heard, which is a very important aspect of compliance and implementation. And if you are not able to justify that there was a genuine mistake or mistake happened because of something else, you are penalized. And they put that on their website. You can go to DOT department and check the amount of penalties they are collecting every year. It's probably more than the profit some of the logistic companies here are making. $1.25 million is what I heard 2 years back when I checked. The Europeans also got wiser to this new method of implementation of compliance. But they started with just before COVID, and unfortunately because of COVID they had to go slow, but after COVID they came back with a bang. But what they did not take their own people, they outsourced this to a security agency to implement the compliance requirement. And when you outsource, obviously that guy is going to now come with very fine-tooth inspection to see that even your label is not compliant, penalize them. I'll give yet another example. He's talking about transparency in documentation. For a long time, as logistician, when we talk about DG, we talk about we want information about the chemical product. Nobody was wanting to give. Then came the fantastic piece of innovation called MSDS. People forgot what MSDS is all about. It's today now called safety data sheet. And it became the de facto standard for classification identification by the airline and the shipping line, whose job was not to do classification and identification. But because the shipper was not doing it and the forwarder was doing it, they got into the picture. So what he mentioned about wrongful data, okay, I had a wonderful case, and I can't escape here by not mentioning that. A customer called me to say that they have been caught by Rotterdam authorities for a shipment of theirs which they have been exporting to that country for 15 years, supposedly a raw material for veterinary pharma. And he said, how can I get caught? I am selling raw material for veterinary product. I am saving some animal's life. So I reminded him that 60 to 70% of the raw material for pharma, forget about veterinary, pharma which are used for making medicine, are also DG class 6.1 or class 3. He said, ऐसे कैसे हो सकता है? I said, okay, tell me what happened actually. So he was caught. It was a shipment called Ethereum bromide. He had classified in the MSDS as non-DG because there was no technology, toxicological data there. It says not applicable. So he was caught. The authority told him 5,000 penalty, 5,000 you pay the penalty. He said, kept on arguing that I'm a SME guy. See what I'm trying to bring about. We are trying to, use wrong logic. I'm SME guy, therefore you should say, not penalize me. I was the first time. He forgot that for 15 years, he was telling that guy for 15 years I'm exporting already. So it's the first time he's saying that I was caught. Now 15 times I did not get caught, so he should leave me this time around. So those guys said, listen, if you argue too much, it goes to the court will definitely decide the case against you, you'll pay 15,000 euros. So I asked him, what did you do next? So he sent me another MSDS. In that, in section 14, it was written as toxic solid inorganic packing group 1. For those of you who are in the DG business, no, packing group 1 is the highest degree of danger. Okay, and I again went back to the section 11, toxicological or 12, toxicological information. Same data, there was nothing there. So I asked him, how did you come to this information? He said, somebody told me this is the right one. I said, why didn't you give that the right one? Then why did you send that? So this stupid guy, I'm telling stupid because he sent it to the same regulator who had caught him in the first place to saying that it was non-DG. Okay. And what we all forget, and that's why I said the MSD is a fabulous invention. It's the most stupidest piece of document that is being used. It is for safety purpose, not for classification. And if you really, those who have done IMDG or any of the regulatory program will know that for toxicological data, very clearly says human experience of using that material is the most important indicator of hazard, and if you don't have that, then only use the toxicological data to classify the product. You get that? So, where do you find that information? In the MSDS, because nobody really reads MSDS. Section 2, hazard identification. Written there was fatal by inhalation. So you don't need any data point to tell it's toxic. That clarified the human experience factor was already giving that. So coming to the issue is that we don't have rigorous and vigorous implementation. I was jokingly telling one of the authorities, I don't want to name them, I said, you're talking about man. You put up an agency in Bombay Port and Bombay Airport, you start inspecting that, you'll get enough money to have, 5,000, 50,000 people on employment because you will catch everybody there. In air cargo, or in air mode, the DGCA has put a penalty of 2 years of imprisonment or 1 crore of fine, or both together. If you ask them how much you have collected, well, in India we don't investigate. That's the other part of our compliance issue, that we don't have a stakeholder committee attached to any of these regulatory authorities. We are all operating in our own silos. And then we come in this conference and then we are so frustrated, we went out of frustration and say, ye nahi ho raha, wo nahi ho raha, but kaise hoga? Because frankly, if you ask everybody honestly, do we want compliance? We don't want compliance. And we add compliance with cost, like that gentleman was saying earlier in the session, that if I ask him to give $100 for cleaning up and making sure, nobody wants to because the other guy is putting it into the earth and he dispatches that. We don't realize that we have a very, very strict Environmental Protection Act where the director of the company can be imprisoned if they are caught violating the Environment Protection Act. But it scares nobody, because unfortunately, unlike GST, and if I am comparing GST with excise and sales tax, if you talk of those of you know excise and sales tax, I think people are very happy, relaxed, kuch na kuch jugaad ho jayega. But come GST, all jugaad business largely has this thing, because government has so much information that they can catch you from somewhere or the other. So today, GST non-compliance is a board matter. But logistic non-compliance is not a board matter at all, because we don't have a supply chain guy sitting as an executive director or an independent director in any of the chemical companies. And surprising to note also, in the last amendment, that is the new amendment, or rather I would say the new Company Act, one of the important piece of legislation they put in there is for operating departments of the company to give a compliance report to the board of directors every month, which includes both legal and regulatory compliance. And if dangerous goods regulation is not a requirement of compliance, what else it is? But show me one company where the operating head has made a report of non-compliance related to dangerous goods transportation to their board member. Not a single company. I would be happy if some college who's there, I mean Somaya College, can go and do a research and find out what is happening in that matter, because we'll get more educated about this issue. And as my friend Lal said, training, lip service to training. I only can say that, being in the training business for last 10 years, from doing one IMDG program every 6 months, now we are doing one program every month. Okay, so that's, people are slowly realizing the need. But then what happens is, training of IMDG code or dangerous goods regulation is the last thing that the company wants to ensure, because they make sure कोई आदमी छुट्टी में है क्या या कुछ काम नहीं करता, उसको भेज दो पहले, उसको करके आ जाएगा. Okay, important work नहीं आता. I tell the people, I said, listen, you have come to my class because you're not wanted in the company. So sit चुपचाप बैठ के अपना कोर्स करके जाओ. Don't think about the company. Don't talk about the phone, because they're not wanting you. They sent you here because of that reason. And so what happens is, you send people who have no interest whatsoever in doing the training. So हम गला फाड़ फाड़ के उसको कितना भी सिखा ले, end of the day, if you ask after 3 months, what did you learn? Zero. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from the audience? I think everything is clear.
Thank you. So, I'm Suresh Pikle from Galaxy. My question is to Mr. Panicker. Being a responsible company, we use UN-approved packages for all type of chemicals, even for the non-DG. But especially we face challenges particularly for the air shipments. When we ship our non-hazard goods in UN-approved packages, so sometimes they ask that because it is a non-DG declaration, and how come you can send in the UN-approved term? So how to deal with this situation? Yeah.
So it's a good thing that you're using a good standard packaging for a non-standard DG, non-DG material. Okay, that's the biggest problem, because people say, why are you focusing so much on packaging? I think we're all losing one aspect. Packaging is our brand. A lousy packaging, whether of dangerous goods or any other product, gives a bad image of our company to our buyer. Okay, but here the confusion arises primarily because people think, you see, for a long time, the logistic industry was built on one single factor. Somebody was talking, he was talking here, trust. The shipping line, the airline trusts the logistic operator that they will do things right for them. The logistic guy thinks the customer is going to do right for them. The customer thinks the logistic guy is going to do right to them. So there was a, in principle, equilibrium position between everybody. So everybody trusted the other. They said, "Isme koi panga panga hone wala nahi hai." Today, when you are using a DG package for non-DG product, what image it gives to my mind is, ye just what you are saying, am I putting an undeclared DG cargo, but saying it's a non-DG cargo? Okay, and that is the problem. So ideally, use your DG package for DG material and not for anything else.
Yeah, thank you.
Any question from this part? Or yeah, there is one. Our moderator is back.
Hello, I'm Ashish Mogi from Scully. I would like to make one question to Mr. Prakash and also to Mr. Panicker. Of late, we see...
So there are two questions or one question?
No, one question for both. Because one is the manufacturer and one is at the training side. So I've seen in many chemical industries, when the loading takes place in the tankers or rail wagons, the loading is actually done by the driver and the cleaner of the transporter. They are not the part of the company. So from safety angle, how do you take care whether the tanker and the cleaner, they are doing the loading safe or not? And then when it comes to the training, Mr. Panicker, do you also train these people down the line who are actually in contact with the hazardous chemical? And then what are the chances of accidents in those cases? Thank you.
To be very honest to this question, Clariant being a responsible care company and a regulatory compliant company, so we hire, there is a special person who will be present at the loading and unloading point. And that is basically the FTE who will be there for monitoring all these situations. So, and he will take care of the loading whenever he is loading and when the loading get completed. Till it reaches to that way bridge, he will be monitoring all this part. Because the vehicle will be checked whenever the vehicle is inside the factory, and the vehicle will be also checked when it is going out of the factory, because there is a dedicated checklist is kept at the security office, and they always check that whether the loading has been completed properly, whether the seal is properly fixed or not. So this is how we monitor, and I appeal to all the supply chain people that this is a standard and regular practice one has to follow.
So there are two aspects to the loading you're talking about. One is packaged goods, packaged dangerous goods. The other is bulk liquid loading in tankers. Okay, as far as the bulk, packaged goods are concerned, obviously it goes to the warehouse and gets loaded by the warehouse people or whoever is there. Are they doing the inspection? Are they trained? A big question mark. I'm not too sure of that. And that's why I tell the people that you come here for training, but how many of you are getting out of your air-conditioned cabin and being on the ground to check what is happening? Okay, that is a reality check one has to do. Tanker loading is a very specialized activity where the company technical person is always present. It's not the driver who's opening the valve and getting the tank. It will never happen like that unless they're trained. Okay. Now, as far as the driver training is concerned, it's a mandatory requirement under the Motor Vehicle Act that the driver has to have an endorsement of DG training on their license. Does it happen? No. So the chemical company under responsible care under the leadership of BASF, had organized training some years back of 600, 700 drivers to ensure that. But what happens is that you are having more than that. We have got 5,000 to 6,000 drivers. How do you cover all of them? So you have a lot of non-compliant drivers already there. But again, as the previous session somebody was talking about, it's all about a cost. Do I get a certified driver coming and pay more, or do I get any driver coming and I pay less? Okay, so it is question of that. Training, yeah, we worked with ICC to develop a series of 11 videos, but that video was made under the security parameter, because of the fear that there are a lot of chemicals which has got security implications. Okay, and drivers need to understand what those are. But large part of those videos were built around the hazard itself. Okay, and it was built in such a manner that it was to be implemented through their responsible care platform, and driver can go to any organization where they're loading, go to the kiosk, just input their name, and they have to do that series of 11 for them to be certified. Okay, ICC implemented it. Immediately after that, I do not know what is the status. Probably Prashant can say more about this. But this is a very mass training. We honestly are not involved directly in that part.
I'll add a few words on that. Just before I say something, your question was more to do around ISO tankers, right? Of filling in tanks, not packaged goods, right? So if you are a responsible organization, and usually you'll see the large names, whether it is BASF, Dow, Lanxess, responsible organizations, they will drive the initiative of EHS, with all grit and determination. And in such cases, whether the filling is happening at overhead silos or underground silos or at factory locations, you will always have the driver and cleaner absent in these areas. They are not supposed to be there. You will never see them there. You will have responsible people over there. But when we talk about, let's say the 90 odd other % of manufacturers or traders that are not as large as these names that I took, then compliance becomes a big question, like what Radha was talking about. For cost elements, you would compromise on safety and security and regulatory, everything. I think anyone who visits Gujarat, with all due respect, and looks at all those companies out there, absolute menace, no regulation at all. In fact, I recollect an incident where we approached the Gujarat Pollution Control Board for the first CTE CTO in the state of Gujarat. They had no idea that aside of manufacturing plants, that warehousing companies storing DG goods would also need a CTE and CTO. So we had to enlighten them. We worked with them over a period of a year and a half in educating them from their own books that this is required to be followed. And that is when we got our first CTE CTO in the state of Gujarat, a state which has been flourishing with chemical companies.
Abhishek, Prakash, or our APR, if you can give your final thoughts so that we can wind up this session.
Hello, my name is Bhalchandra and my question is to Mr. Ravindra ji. So you talked about due diligence in sourcing. You have given the example of scrap vendor also. But sir, you have to be very observative and of course keep an eye while doing due diligence. So you have lots of small vendors you deal with, and due to the flat organization rightly now we have, especially in sourcing, how can we keep watch on every small vendor regarding, so are there any strategies you can suggest?
So whether the organization is flat or vertical, you need to ask one question to yourself: are you really ready to compromise on your values? If not, what you do for big vendors or small vendors doesn't matter. You have a checklist, and according to checklist, you check anything and everything about the supplier. because you are forming a business alliance with them and they can pull you down. Like a scrap vendor, if he's not treating the scrap in a regulatory mentioned way, then if that is found out, as a principal supplier, you will be caught and you will suffer. So the question is to what extent your risk appetite is. And more than risk appetite, what are your values permitting you to do? So that will define what you need to do and not whether it is big or small.
And it is also about brand reputation. So,
I think,
so if your brand, if you want to elevate your brand, you will have to take that small baby steps and move ahead.
Praveen, I'll also add to what
sure.
Ravindra just mentioned to Bhal's query. So we've, after 2.5, 3 years of research and speaking to people seated here, some of them, if not all, we founded an organization called CSRLSC. Now people get misled by the word CSR, but to a certain extent it is a noble effort. But it is not corporate social responsibility. It is called Center for Standards and Ratings in Logistics and Supply Chain. Now, since you mentioned supplier due diligence, one such supplier is your service partner, right? Which is basically your trucking company, warehousing company, freight forwarder, name it within, within the world of logistics and supply chain. So we've created 5 modular buckets of parameters that could be either mandatory globally, mandatory for the country, wish list for the sector, and various such buckets, where even for the sector, say for example chemicals. So I think Radha mentioned about driver endorsement, DG certification endorsement. How many of us check it, right? But the fact is you have to check it. Now if you are as capable as Ravindra and his team to do that supplier due diligence very well, great, hats off to you. But is everybody capable of, do they have the bandwidth? Sometimes no. Isn't that process very time consuming? And maybe even after that, you may not be 100% sure of that information. You can do a financial check, due diligence. You can get a CRISIL report, an ICRA report, a CARE report, or whatever. It tells you about the financial health. How do you know whether the particular supplier has sectoral experience for X number of years and his OTIF, on time in full score, has been for last 12 months XYZ or X%? How do you know that their DEPS, damage, expiry, pilferage, shortages score is X%? How do you know that what they are claiming to be through a reference or recommendation, they really stand for it? So all that information will basically be available at a click of a button. But I can't do it for a scrap vendor because we have limited ourselves only for logistics and supply chain. Whether it is for chemicals or pharma or any such, and the reason we had to do this is because we have regulatory framework. We have the government saying, this is how you need to do it. We have the industry saying, okay, can we make it better? But we don't have the in-between, which is who is checking it? Who is checking it? You can actually pass something by giving money under the table. You can do that, but at what risk? At what safety risks? Right? So this is something that we have launched about 6 months ago, and very recently we participated in the ULIP, Unified Logistics Interface Platform, in the hackathon to share our idea how even drivers can get better through Sarthi, e-Sarthi. There is a module on ULIP. Through e-Sarthi, how can we fetch information whether the driver's license is valid, it is not fake, whether it has DG certificate, DG endorsement or not, whether it was renewed haphazardly, whether there are various inputs that you can get from that database. In fact, even Vahan, e-Vahan, e-Sarthi, there are various modules. So we are taking all this information and churning out those data points that would be useful for people like you to assess your supplier. So you don't have to invest 6-7 months of insane amounts of hard work and still not be 100% sure, but get a credible report like a CIBIL or a CRISIL and go through all those parameters. It will be vetted and audited by the likes of TUVs and Bureau Veritases of the world. So that's probably going to change how supplier due diligence will happen.
Thank you. Thank you
If
so
you have
much.
any last thoughts before we wind, and you have been working very closely with the government, so if you can just throw some light on the new developments which are happening, which would be useful for the audience out here.
In fact, I recollect this incident where I was at Mahendra's office, and Mahendra and me were discussing a peculiar point where he said standardization of containers or truck types, and he said this is going on for years. He's taken it through ICC, and it is taking years and years. The point is, fingers crossed, touch wood, I've been able to understand how the government thinks. And once you understand how they think, you know what to say, when to say, how much to say, right? So, since I work very closely with DPIIT, Ministry of Commerce, I've been able to figure this out, that if you take points to them which do not directly, or which are not directly proportional to their goals, then they become secondary to them, no matter how important they are to you. So you have to be able to do that hard work of picking your points, aligning them with what the government's vision is through Viksit Bharat or through SDG goals, Sustainability Development Goal. And there are multiple things that you can actually align them. It is just that the language you speak is not what they are listening, because they can only understand the goals that are there in their mind. I mean, just look at us, all of us, right? We've worked in the corporate environment. We remember KPIs. These are my KPIs. I have to achieve this for this year. And for the next year, what's my plan? So we draw a long-term plan, we draw a short-term plan. And we work on those. And suddenly, if somebody, your boss comes and tells you, do this, it's not in your KPI. What are you going to do about it? You probably put it aside and find a method to not work on it, and invest your time and energy towards those KPIs, because that is going to give you your increment, your promotion, etc., etc. So your points may be very valid for the industry, for you, but you have to align it with government's vision. Whether it is Viksit Bharat 2047, 2030, SDG 2030, read it, invest that time, and you will see how quickly will they be interested in solving that problem.
So, a big round of applause for all the speakers out here.